When the long-range bombing of the heart of Germany was, as yet, but a fantastic dream, fighter control had been brought to a high-level efficiency as a strictly defensive proposition. The idea of offensive controlling was somewhat of a novelty to those very early controllers who in 1940 to 41 set before their ops boards in England or Malta, on Oahu and along America's coastlines. They had thought and acted mainly in terms of intercepting and attacking enemy. They aimed to keep their fighters in readiness on the ground until they were scrambled into the air on the approach of an enemy. In fact, in those days, which now seems so very long ago, today's concept of a strategic air force as entirely separate from a tactical force was little known. It took the experience of the Allies in the North African campaigns to prove that doctrine. As a prelude then to the story of the strategic fighter control of 1943 to 45, it is necessary to outline what had been learned and done up to 1942. The classic example, of course, is England. The victory of the Royal Air Force in that historic conflict that has come to be known as the Battle of Britain is a monument to control, a control so well-informed and so efficient that it confounded the Luftwaffe and handed Hermann Göring a blow he never quite got over. The key to the British system was, and is as Billy Mitchell had described, a mass of quick, accurate information collectively known as air intelligence, clearly displayed before the air commander. Early warning of the approach of aircraft was given by radar, the bright new weapon of this war. Plots over land were furnished by a network of observer posts. Every flight of an aircraft within range the system was given a number, and its progress across the map on the operation table was tracked by means of markers and arrows. Displayed along with the number of the flight was all the available information on how many aircraft there were, their type and height, etc. This data and the positions were changed constantly by corps of plotters, getting their information by telephone from the various sources. On the operations side, to make use of this air intelligence, was assembled all information on the availability of aircraft for defense, the weather, serviceability of airdromes, and all the other facts needed by the air commander in reaching a decision as to how to dispose and employ his forces. The very efficient clerking staff in each control room, which collected most of this information, was designated OPSB in RAF terminology. This same commander was given control of the related defense, i.e. anti-aircraft artillery, searchlights, balloon barrages. He also had the responsibility of informing the civil defenses, such as the air raid warning system and ARP services. The entire system was interconnected with what was probably the most complex net of communications yet devised anywhere. It was imperative in England that information and orders passed instantaneously. The Germans were only across the channel, 22 miles away at the nearest point. This is not intended to be a rehash of the great story already told so many times of the heroic air defense of Great Britain. The important point to be made is that it was here, in this period of 1940 to 42, that fighter control proved itself once and for all an essential weapon of modern war. Much that has come since in the development of the art of controlling aircraft stems from the experience of the RAF in the supreme test of the Battle of Britain. It was the fighter control system that made the difference between what the Germans planned to do and the comparatively little they were finally able to do. So few, as Prime Minister Churchill called the RAF fighters, were able to do so much because they were controlled and thus able to conserve their previous precious strength for the moments that counted. And it is worth recording here that all this was entirely according to plan. When the time came for building the defenses, the British had the blueprints. The RAF battle orders, published previously, described so accurately what must be done that scarcely any of it had to be altered in the doing. America drew copiously on the RAF well of experience when it came time to establish air defense organizations in the AAF. The interceptor commands, which were set up to guard the U.S. coastline and some of the territories copied the ideas that had proved sound in Britain. They sited secret radio stations, they were called Dirac stations in those days, at high places along the shores. They developed a large ground observer corps command divided into filter areas to facilitate evaluation of the plots before they were relayed to the main regional ops boards. Everyone who lived in any of the coastal states will remember the great campaign to get women volunteers to operate the aircraft warning system. Volunteers did all the telling and plotting and operated most of the communications to keep the information centers working. And these centers became the training grounds for most of the key control personnel who have since served the AAF so well throughout the world. Also from the RAF came the help and guidance of experienced D controllers and signal officers who taught in the AAF School of Applied Tactics at Orlando, a school originally established by a cadre from Old 2nd Interceptor Command at Seattle. The change from interceptor commands to air defense wings was a logical development, and about the time the wings started going overseas to take up controlling in real earnest, they were again changed to the present form of fighter wings. It must again be emphasized that in all this development, the thinking was pretty much along defensive and tactical lines. It would have been a bold thinker indeed who could have visualized a fighter controller sitting in England communicating with his formations over Berlin. Yet, such was to be the case. It was just before the Pearl Harbor attack in 1941 that the first American control systems were ready to function. In fact, the reader will remember that an SCR-270 radar actually picked up the formation of Jap aircraft as they approached Oahu, but there was no machinery operating to take cognizance of the report, evaluate it, and act upon it. The very night before that attack, the USS Tasker H. Bliss sailed out under the Golden Gate Bridge with the 5th Interceptor Command aboard. The mission of the 5th Interceptor Command was to be the establishment of the air defense of Manila and Davao. It is hardly necessary to add that the next night, the Bliss again sealed under the Golden Gate Bridge, in the opposite direction. There is no better illustration of what a late comer this fighter control weapon is. It didn't take long for every military power in the world to recognize the value of what the British had taught and to attempt to develop an equivalent control. The Jap turned up with radar on Kiska. The Germans, in their thorough, methodical way, began developing the highly intricate but never imaginative system of JAFUs and JAG divisions. And everywhere the Yuzov went, a control system went along. The navies of the world, too, were quick to adapt the new lessons to their specific problems. Many an air battle in both the Pacific and the Atlantic has been won because of the efficiency of seaborne control. The British put a smaller edition of their home defense system on Malta, and in 1942 it probably meant the difference between holding and losing that cornerstone of empire. Thus were the principles of air interception worked out and proved in control rooms all over the world, wherever there were valuable installations subject to air attack. Whether it was in one of the impressive underground ops rooms in England or in a shack on the Aleutian Island, the idea was the same: to plot the track of the enemy and to hit him before he reached his objective. Research and experimentation went on, and at an extremely rapid rate all during this defensive era. Excellent portable equipment was developed to enable an complete control system to be carried into the remotest jungle and put into operation almost at once. Great strides were made in that branch of radar known as GCI, Ground Control Interception, in which the position of aircraft appears graphically on the fluorescent surface or scope of a PPI-2 plan position indicator. The drive was already on, in other words, to find ways of getting better, more accurate information at greater distances. Essential prelude to the evolution of strategic offensive controlling. Much was learned also about air-to-ground and air-to-air communications. Practically in the middle of the opening phase of the Battle of Britain, the RAF switched over from HF, high frequency, to VHF, very high frequency, radio telephone in their fighter aircraft, and control. It was much more dependable and freer from static noises. The air defense wings in the States began using VHF in 1942. That old bugaboo of control, positive identification, was also the subject of much study and experiment. Since the Air Intelligence Network normally reports all flights of aircraft, it is necessary somewhere down the line to distinguish between friends and enemies. Thus was involved the system of clearing every friendly flight with the central control room, identifying it as friendly when it appeared on the ops board, and by a process of elimination, focusing attention on the unknown flights, presumed then to be hostile. Then was developed IFF, Identification Friend or Foe, a radar device carried in an airplane which responds to the impulses of the early warning radar, producing distinctive series of blips on the screen of the instrument, suitably coded. IFF could be used without too much danger of compromise by the enemy and help to identify our own formations. A device that came to be used far more widely by control to keep track of its own fighter aircraft was a simple fixing by means of triangulating bearings taken by a series of widely separated receiving stations on the automatic transmission of a pipsqueak signal from the aircraft. The development of all this as used by the 8th in England will be discussed in much greater detail in the second part of this document. We see, then, the substantial foundation on which the strategic offensive control system of USDAF was to be built. In England, the 8th Air Force was to find some of what it needed ready-made. In the Mediterranean, portable facilities would have to be dependent on almost entirely. Since this story is based on the experience of the 8th, please permit a brief panoramic impression of the vast British air defense system, seen through American eyes in the spring of 1943. An island bristling with guns, anti-aircraft rockets, barrage balloons, and other unpleasant surprises for the Jerrys. An island interlaced with control communications, reaching to dozens of airfields where day fighters and night fighters stood alert for scramble orders against any German rash enough to cross the channel. RAF Fighter Command, seasoned and tough, respectful of the Hun but without the least fear of him, knowledgeable, staffed by a host of capable people. An outfit that had the defense of the homeland well in hand, and becoming concerned with ways and means of mounting the developing offensive against Nazi land in close operational association with bomber and coastal commands of RAF. 11 Group, 12, 10, and 9 groups, the operational subordinates of Fighter Command, roughly equivalent to American wings. That number 11 Group Ops room, deep underground, spacious, brilliantly lighted, with all the comforts you could expect in a home without sunlight. A precursor, perhaps, of the sort of quarters all civilization will work and live in come another war. It was here at 11 Group that the largest part of the Battle of Britain was managed. The place was built not a moment too soon. Sectors within the groups, pieces of pie with London in the middle. Sector controllers getting their orders from group, taking care of their own formations of fighters, and doing the actual work of intercepting. The sector ops rooms in all the odd little places over England, schools, mansions, huts, Army and Brown, the ACAC crowd, mingling with the WAFs and airmen, the tannoy, brass-throated and strident, for the controller to pass instant orders to pilots at airdromes. The fighter squadrons, Hurricanes and Spits, and then the snarling Typhoons. Groupie, the group captain sector commander, and the wing commander flying, equivalent of the American group leader. It was a good team, that still is. The thing for the reader of this booklet to appreciate in thinking of strategic or offensive control is this: the Americans in England were free to concentrate on long-range development, to experiment and to work out the many details with virtually no interference by the Jerrys. And this was possible because the RAF relieved the use-off of defense control responsibility. We owe a great deal to our British cousins who were always so eager to leap upon the Hun whenever he stuck his black nose over the horizon. As the story unfolds in Chapter 3, it will be seen that in this endeavor, as in everything else done to defeat the Germans, there was good teamwork. In much the same way that the Allied armies sprang patent loose for a fast run around right end at St. Lo, the Allied air forces gave the 8th a free hand to develop its long-range punch. That umbrella held over East Anglia by 11 Group and 12 Group by the sector controls at Coltishall and North Weald and Biggin Hill made all the difference in the world. Keep this in mind in analyzing what was done at Saffron Walden.